So it's been a long time since I've listened to a Mike Patton record, which means that I haven't been spinning anything from Phantomaz or Faith No More or Tomahawk or any of his variety of other projects in quite some time. So to hear the voice of madness once again in listening to Oddfellows, which I'm about to review from Tomahawk, the new Tomahawk album that was released this past Tuesday, was actually kind of a nice breath of fresh air that had a little bit of a, back history to it. It's been 6 years since the release of the last Tomahawk album, and in that 6-year period, well, Mike's always been busy, so there's not exactly any surprise there. However, a lot of people will only remember Mike from his days in Faith No More. They probably haven't examined that much his work from either Tomahawk, Phantomaz, or his plethora of other side projects. And with Tomahawk, it's kind of a, build your own opinion type affair. These are guys that are able to kind of take the idea of alternative rock or experimental rock and kind of just turn it on end, infusing ideas of jazz and other types of music within this. And Oddfellows is able to kind of take that same idea and continue it on, while also continuing with some more, some people would say the word commercial, but I would call it more accessible means. Now, if people are expecting weirdness, this is not to say that Tomahawk has taken the conventional route and have just completely and totally ignored the idea of weirdness on this record. It's definitely there. Just consider the song Baby Let's Play Blank, which basically you can fill in if you want. Mike Patton certainly does within the context of the song, but that's not necessarily meaning that you can't fill it in with whatever the hell you want. Songs such as IOU or White Hats and Black Hats definitely also showcase this weirdness, and really, whenever you just look at the track listing of this album, there is definitely that duality to it. There is that same weirdness that you kind of come to experience and know from anything that Mike Patton has been associated with, because he's got that kind of far-out atmosphere to him. But at the same time, you see other song titles such as Rise Up Dirty Waters, The Quiet Few, and I can almost see them, and it almost seems a little bit more along the tame side of convention. That's because these guys are starting to bridge the gap with a lot more rock, a little bit furthering the experimental idea, and then blending in some jazz, blending in some just cool stripped down little bluesy styles of work, which is kind of interesting considering they recorded this at a recording studio that's owned by Dan Auerbach of the Black Keys. So there you go. There's definitely a little bit that can be said regarding that, even though there was absolutely no input from him whatsoever. As far as the music itself is concerned and the album, it's definitely one that flows very nicely for, it being weird. For it being weird, it definitely has a consistency to it, not to mention it's able to maintain itself, which means that as you're listening to this record, you don't feel as though you are lost within it. It's something that's very, very easy to listen to from front to back, so you don't necessarily have that bogged down, alienated feeling from track to track that kind of disassociates you from the album and keeps you kind of far away from the production and far away from the music that's embodied within it. Instead, you feel a little bit more drawn in with each individual track. You feel like you are witnessing or listening to a greater whole that's kind of opening itself up from track to track. Even though there's a lot of individualistic aspects to each and every one of these songs, considering the flow is so good, it's able to kind of flow as a whole as opposed to feeling way too individualistic. Overall, this album is able to boast a lot of things that are very, very positive for Tomahawk. It showcases a tightness within this band, and it showcases that they were able to do a really, really great thing in a very short period of time. The complete writing process for this album took probably about a week, recording, should I say, even though it's been 6 years since their last album was released. This is one of those things where they're all working on multitudes of projects, so it's not necessarily something where they've spent the past 6 years just absolutely cramming in their heads, oh shit, what are we going to do with the next Tomahawk album? Especially after the LP release last year, eponymous to Anonymous, which actually featured a slot where you could fit in the LP, the vinyl, actually, of this album, because this was one that they knew was going to be released, which is an interesting idea, something that we've seen with other albums, however, done in a worse way. The last one that comes to mind is actually Uno by Green Day, which came with a box where you could collect Dos and Trey, whenever it probably would have made more sense just to release the three in a box set after they were all three released, considering they were coming so quickly. With Tomahawk, on the other hand, they're able to do this the logical route. Not to mention this music, even though it's, probably inaccessible to a lot of the more trendy alt-rock hipsters. It's definitely one that, for those that enjoy the far-out noises of the mentally deranged Mike Patton, at least in my eyes, this is definitely an album to pick up. Yeah, it does have those shining points where it seems as though they've kind of toned it down a little bit, maybe made it a little bit more accessible to the public, but this isn't necessarily a bad thing. Waratorium is a great example of that. It's something that doesn't have that conventional weirdness, it's kind of more direct. And that directness actually makes it a really, really good song. It's something that kind of breaks you from the monotony a little bit, and, well, it kind of gives you something that you're reminded of that's kind of normal and natural. It almost is abnormal for Mike, but remember, he was in Faith No More. And all the weird things that they did, they wrote a couple of songs that did actually do really well on the radio, so he's capable. The whole entire band is very, very capable, and the tightness and just really the dexterity of this band, their ability to really just formulate these tracks and really just seem like they're free-flowing with it is also a tremendous positive. It's something that is, well, if you expect anything less from a band that has Mike Patton in it, then you're bound to be disappointed. Consider Phantomos. Phantomos is able to go from having 30 tracks of 2 to 3 minute long music to having one album that's 74 minutes in length. So let's face it, he's got a broad scope and he's not afraid to show it. Anyway, overall, this is an album that certainly has a lot of the markings of a great hard rock release. It has that experimental nature that I like to praise. If you remember my Hatebreed review from yesterday, I said that bands that tend to do the same thing over and over again have that samey feel to it. And by samey, I mean it just kind of gets droll and it gets old. With Tomahawk, you really don't know what you're getting into each and every time. It's something where they could really, sprout up something new on you. And whenever it happens, well, you're not really surprised, but at the same time, you're curious. So yeah, that curiosity was definitely well worth the wait for this album, and fans should certainly be excited about it. I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10. I really enjoy this. I think that it has a potential to really be one of those sleeper hard rock hits, and I certainly hope that the audience is able to get out and pick it up, because it's definitely well worth the wait of 6 years. So definitely check out this album, definitely check out this band if you haven't, and, well, I think just for the fun of it, I'm going to go back and listen to some old Faith No More. Angel Dust is calling me. Not the drug. Do you have some drugs? I'd like some drugs.